There are few issues in the legislature that generate more emotions than immigration. This session we are facing a number of proposals, in particular House Bill 2372, that calls upon Kansas to adopt Arizona-type legislation. What does that mean? Well, the first facts that we need to take into consideration is the status of undocumented people in the United States and in Kansas. A person who comes to the United States and stays beyond their visa is out of status. They are not criminals in the eyes of the federal government. They are simply guilty of a civil violation. Again, not criminals. A person who comes to the United States without any papers is guilty of a misdemeanor, not a felony. Those basic facts come into play when we look at House Bill 2372 and what it's asking Kansans to do. The bill asks Kansans to adopt all of the federal law enforcement provisions, and it also raises the penalties for some of those violations. The first thing the bill does is talks about businesses. The policy behind Arizona-type legislation is to ask undocumented people to leave the nation through a series of attrition through enforcement. It means making people so uncomfortable that they simply leave. In Kansas, the proposal is that businesses who do business with the state or local units of government must enroll and verify that they are enrolled in the federal voluntary program called E-Verify. E-Verify is an electronic system where persons enroll and then any new hire is checked through the system. Again, it is a voluntary program at the federal level, and under Kansas's proposal would become mandatory to those individuals or businesses doing business with state or local units of government. That doesn't sound so bad, except for many businesses today do not use E-Verify. In fact, across of the 236,000 businesses in Kansas, a little over 2,300 use it in Kansas today. So we would be mandating a federal voluntary program. The consequences for violating that provision could be a 25% liquidated damages of the cost of the contract, or in some circumstances could rise to a felony prosecution for a business owner who violates the provision. Another section of 2372 calls upon local law enforcement officers to stop and, upon a reasonable suspicion, ask a person their status in the United States. Again, this is a completely different standard than we have seen in law enforcement in prior years. For example, when law enforcement stops somebody today, they may stop for a variety of reasons. Let's say it's a seatbelt violation. Under the proposal, once an officer has a reasonable suspicion, not probable cause, to believe that that person is unauthorized, then the officer is required to detain the person until such time as they show and prove through the federal system that that person is or is not lawfully in the United States. While the officer is detaining that person, there are costs. If the officer has to then arrest or hold them overnight, again, there are costs of jail time. In Kentucky, who also considered some of these same type of measures, they have developed a methodology to calculate the cost to local units of government. In Kentucky, who has fewer undocumented workers than Kansas is expected to have, their costs are estimated to be $40 million. This similar methodology, when applied to Kansas, appears to cost Kansans $60 million. The current estimates, official estimates, of House Bill 2372 do not take into consideration any of the costs to local units of government. KLA and a coalition of 20 businesses oppose these provisions because we see this as a serious economic impact, meaning that property taxes will go up. We've asked the legislature to do a comprehensive economic analysis of this bill before it moves forward. We've also asked that the legislature look to the costs of what happens when undocumented persons leave the state. In Arizona, there were 2 rounds of cost to business. First, those by boycotts from out-of-state people. The second was when undocumented people left the state. Those persons and their family members purchase goods and services, and when they left Arizona, it cost Arizona billions of dollars. Finally, I think it's important for us to ask the question, are we Arizona? Kansas is not Arizona. We are not a border state. The coalition has responded to the legislature repeatedly saying this is a federal issue. For Kansas to adopt this policy is a major policy change, and it will cost Kansans a lot of money. We ask that we look to those federal opportunities to fix the program, not simply place a Band-Aid on it or adopt a policy that is known to have challenges and cost to local taxpayers. The coalition has stood up and has been successful in tabling this bill until such time as this kind of information is available. If you're wondering why we oppose these bills, it's about dollars, and it's about knowing what things cost before we adopt the policies.